All right, so first of all, welcome to everybody to this year's Web Carnival. It is the 6th Web Carnival that we've been doing, and most recently we did our last Web Carnival on race and queerness in ELT, and this time we thought to celebrate Paulo Freire's 100th birthday, it would be a good time to pair up finally with BRAZTESOL in order to do a joint event to commemorate this fantastic work that he's done. And in doing so, we wanted to invite as many people from the community to share their ideas about Freire's impact on ELT, whether we're implementing critical pedagogy in one way or another, and what our experiences are of doing so in our ELT world. So I want to point out just a couple of quick things before we really get too far into it. So I'm going to go to our program so that I can show you a few different things. So when we do go to our program, it should look kind of like this. I noticed that in other shares, it looked like one continuous white page all the way down. But for other people, it looks more like this, where we have different page breaks, and that's what I'm hoping you see. The first thing I want to mention is that one of the perspectives that we aim to do throughout the Web Carnival is to share some of the wealth with different charities. And last year, we were able to donate a significant amount of money to Casa in Brazil. And this year, we don't have a specific charity in mind just yet. We're still collecting ideas from participants. But what you can do here is you can click on Suggest a Charity and go there and give us an idea of what charity do you think would be a needy one and a relevant one for this Web Carnival, and one we'll choose at the end of the 2 days which one will receive the money. Also, this Web Carnival is free as usual, but we do really hope that you'll consider donating on a pay what you can sort of scale. This will be where most of the proceeds come from that we're going to be able to split with the charity that is chosen by the participants, and some between IATEFL, which itself is a charity as well, and BRAZTESOL Brasilia. So you can, for donations, if you feel it's worth it and you have the money to spend, then please click here or click here on the GoFundMe link and donate whatever it is that you feel is possible for you. BRAZTESOL obviously has a couple of sponsors, which we'd like to acknowledge, 7 English and Education Perfect. And below on the last thing I'll say is that we have a couple of pages of days at a glance. So these don't have the times on them, as you might have recognized. They're just sort of ways to scan. But of course, TDSIG will be monitoring this room, and BRAZTESOL Brasilia, our partners, will be monitoring that room. And so you can see right now there is just one session happening. This is the session we're about to have. And then after that, we have concurrent sessions. So you're going to have to choose, but they'll be recorded, so we'll have access to them later on. If you skip down, you'll see the different time zones for different cities in the world, and hopefully you can find yours there. And if not, you can click on this A or this F, and that will give you the start time for the day in your time zone. And then finally, below that, we can see details for each one of the sessions so that you can read the abstracts and you can get to know a little bit what's coming up. You can also click here in order to join the room as well, so you don't have to jump back and forth. It's totally up to you what you do. But I would like to now introduce our very first speaker before it gets too far off. Fernanda Liberali is from Brazil, and I honestly really just met her right now, and in the last 10 minutes that we had some conversation, we recognized that our interests intersect in many ways. And while she was one of the last additions to our Web Carnival, I think she's going to be one of the best. So I'm really happy to start off this Web Carnival, and I'm going to pass the mic over to you, Fernanda, when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Tyson. Well, it's reciprocal. I felt very welcomed by you, and I feel very happy to be here with you all. It's a pleasure to join a group such as this. And I thank both James and Gladys for the invitation. I was very, very happy to have the opportunity to share some of the ideas we in our group have developed on the basis of Paulo Freire. I'm very proud and honored to be part of the same program where Paulo Freire used to work. So I teach in the same place with the same colleagues and with the same, let's say, with the same spirit of transformation and change and the opportunity to view the world in a different way. So I thank you very much for this opportunity. I will start in attention to the need to include the different participants with my audio description. So I am a cisgender white woman of Indigenous, European, and African ancestry. I have short black hair and brown eyes. I'm wearing a black dress with white flowers, with pearl earrings and shiny pearl necklace. I like shiny things just like Tyson does too. And in my background, you will see there is a shelf with books, my Marx and my Vygotsky, and that's where I am in my room, my office, in my house. I'm very, very happy to join you, and I will share my screen with you. Please let me know if there is any problem seeing my screen, and I will start my presentation. Well, you can see with the picture I showed that Carnival is part of my idea of what beauty is, what we expect to have as joyfulness, as feeling part of a community, feeling part of a world, of what the indigenous people call the good living, bem viver, kumai sutta. So today I will be talking about the colonial practices that can create this space of joy, this space of equity, this space of possibilities for all people to be and to be represented in life and in everyday practices. Well, who am I? Just so you know a little bit. I work, as I said, at PUC São Paulo at 3 different post-graduation programs. I work at Teachers Education program. It's called FORMEP, at the curriculum where Paulo Freire used to work, and at the one where I graduated from and took my master and doctorate degree, which is Applied Linguistic and Language Education. I work on what we call a de-encapsulated curriculum, and my main concern is on liberating education, through which people not only learn how to view the world critically, but also feels responsible and empowered to do it. The research that my group and I conduct is a critical collaborative one. What does it mean? It means that we engage with the realities we are studying. We try to transform and be transformed within the process of doing research. So we work with different groups, with very wealthy ones, with very poor ones, with regular schools, bilingual schools, language schools, school for the deaf people, for the migrant people, for the LGBTQIP community, with people with disabilities. We deal with very difficult themes such as bullying, like the situation with the blue whales game from some years ago, with the top 10 game, which were situations that led many young people to commit suicide and other difficulties they had to face. We work with prejudice against the LGBT community, with anti-racist actions. We organize against hunger. We are engaged with reality because as part of reality, we believe that we are in a dynamic process of changing, and we change as students, as teachers, and as people. So we think that schools are great responsibility. We have great responsibility towards this. So my research is conducted within LACI, which is a research group. It is sponsored by CNPq, by PPEC, Marie Curie Actions, by FAPESP, and I work, as you can see here, at PUC São Paulo. You may be asking, what does what I am presenting have to do with what you do and with language teaching, language courses, language education? Well, I think that every one of us, we are all responsible for the ungrievables, and we have to be connected. We cannot do education unless we are all connected. So for my presentation today, I will start discussing what these ungrievables are and how we can reflect about what we do within a context where there are people who are considered disposable. So after that, I will discuss what a decolonial background or practice could be, the language, what in this sense, how language education could be viewed. I will talk about engaged multiliteracy, which is based on Freire's ideas. I will present some projects with insurgent practices in which we believe we are building cracks on the wall, like Catherine Walsh presents. And then I will say how this can lead us towards what the indigenous people in the Abya-Yala, the Americas, call the good living. So I invite you all to join me and to be very present in this discussion conversation. I hope to have time for us to stop in the end and talk a little bit. So the Ungreevables. This is a picture of favela in Rio, and as you know, Rio faces huge problems. Just in the last few weeks, we have seen so many Black people being killed in violent ways, in it's impossible to understand what those deaths were, but these people are considered ungrievable because we live in a place where while some could stay at home, others had to work, had to leave their homes, had nothing to eat, had nothing to live by. And people were thinking about a lockdown. What is a lockdown in a favela in Rio? How many people are there in the room? What is there to do and how can they survive? We live in a world of contrast. While people spend lots and lots of money, billionaires go to space, in Brazil, people are fighting for bones to eat because they have nothing else. So in a world of contrast, how can we understand society? How can we teach in a situation where there is a just way of living? So these competing realities, they cannot be acceptable. And that's what Bembe calls necropolitics. It's very much connected to the idea that some have a lot while others have nothing. And this leads to the destruction of some people, those who live at death worlds, because they are not important. They are considered less important than the others. So their lives are not essential for reality or for some people, and they decide those who are going to live and how they're going to live, and those who are going to die and how they're going to die. And all this, according to Souza Santos, is based on and guided by ideas such as capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy. So let's see a little bit about this, because we who work with language teaching, sometimes we work towards this idea of coloniality, not coloniality, because of course we are not a colony anymore, but we are still within coloniality, which is this complex of inferiority, this alienation against things that perpetuate a sense of dependence upon the others, that sees, for example, that the North is considered better than the south of the hemisphere, that guides ideas of this way of speaking is good and that way of speaking is bad, that way of living is good and the other way of living is bad. And normally it's a cisgender men's reality. It's based on a heteronormative way of seeing the world, and all this is considered right, good, while on the other hand, everything that deviates from these ways of considering something proper is set as something bad, as something less important, something that is disposable, that is, not important at all. So there is a coloniality of power, which leads also to a coloniality of the minds. And we who live in the South mostly, many times we look outside our own reality as if everything from the North was good and everything in the South is bad. And this is part of the coloniality that we are talking about. So Eduardo Galeano has beautiful poem about the nothing, which he calls Los Nadie. And it's beautiful to see how differently we see realities, because we have a complex of inferiority. And this is connected with the idea of capitalism. So there is this idea that not only our means of producing money is controlled nowadays, but our lives, our essence as human beings, our very core ways of being are controlled and manipulated towards ideas that sometimes are against our own views of the world or what we see as correct. But we are within this. We need money to travel. We want money to buy a new t-shirt or whatever. So we let ourselves be conducted through this process. And of course, women are part of this as well. Not only we are controlled by a world of men, but we are also excluded or considered inferior because of our ways of living, because our power and our life force is not seen as a creative energy, which could be employed into very important things, but are diminished, are silenced, are erased, and we suffer a lot of violence. And this comes to education as well. It seems that, oh, why are you talking about this if we are here to talk about language teaching? Well, this is part of everything. Everything we do is within the realm of this reality that we live. So we accept and we walk here. I don't know if all of you are from Brazil or where you are, but if you walk in Brazil nowadays, if you go to downtown São Paulo and you see how many people living in horrible situations are, it's just like what Butler said. They are not useful. They will never achieve the expected standards. They do not produce, they do not consume, they don't act as people expect, so they are not important. They can die, or if they kill themselves, that's okay. And it's not okay. It's not okay. And this is something that we have to carry with us when we think about what we teach, how we teach, and what education is. When we look at the pandemic, and we see the differences in realities and how people could guarantee or not, because mostly it was not guaranteed, how people were not guaranteed the minimum education during the pandemic. And still now, there are kids who cannot, have the minimum possibilities of education. And they are in many ways being responsible for their own process of development, because the government does not view it as essential, or their concern to guarantee that they have access to education. So what we see and what I have been denouncing is the necroeducation that we are living through, that determines that some will have access to school while others won't. It's unbelievable that in Brazil last year, people did not guarantee that all the teenagers could have access to our exam that leads them to enter the universities. And we had to fight a lot to manage to get a chance for them to participate. But even so, it's not fair, because many of them didn't have classes at all. They didn't have access to internet, so they could have classes on WhatsApp, because that's what they were having. So if conditions are denied, what kind of world is there? What kind of education? Then you may ask, but the rich people are learning, they are having this. So no, we are all losing, because if one loses, we all lose. And we need to move towards decoloniality. We need to find forms of undoing this colonial subjectivity that has been infused in us. It's structural in us. We need to break from these patterns of existing, of thinking, of doing. We have to believe, just like Mignolo suggests, that there are different ways of living, a harmonious, a full life. So, thinking about what Paulo Freire taught us about a practice of freedom, we have to believe it's possible to overcome practices of domination, of oppression. We have to find ways to use the problems we live through as the basis for us to start our ways of teaching. We have to think about our students, rich, poor, no matter who, as participants in and with the world. We have to increase the challenges they go through. We have to find ways to, together with them, devise ways to respond to these challenges. And we have to create new challenges, understand that challenges will always exist, but we need to construct new understandings, and we have to use these understandings to respond to the challenges and move on. And we cannot do this if we don't view ourselves as educators who fight against oppression. So language education must find a way for us to communicate, but not only that, to interact, to become with the others. We live in a world of super diversity. Vertovec said that it's not only a question of ethnicity, it's everything. It's gender, it's religion, it's views of the world. So how do we live in this diversity? How do we expand who we are, where we are, how we are, with whom we interact? How do we build these possibilities? How do we teach language as a means for us to expand our possibilities of intervening in the world? How do we see language not only as a set of linguistic characteristics or resources or apparatus which we have to teach in a different form, but as something, as a complex of resources that can create for us and for the others ways of moving through different contexts? How do we teach for mobility, with mobility, in the sense that language will make it possible for us to connect with the others, to move around in different situations, in different contexts. For example, today I'm here talking to you about this topic. Last week at the very same time, I was on Paulista Avenue, speaking and shouting against the injustice that was committed against Moises, one Congolese living in Brazil who asked for his money and was killed by people in a very violent way. So how do I move from a moment like this with you in an academic context to a moment of fighting on the streets against oppression? How do I make both moments to fight against oppression in different ways? How do I develop mobility to communicate, interact, and create the world with the others? That's when multimodality and seeing language through its multiple modes becomes so essential. How do I find my gestures, my movement, my language, my intonation, my choice of words, my ways of dressing, everything as semiotic forms for me to communicate with people? And how do I teach my students to do that as well? Not only to use the correct tense, not only to use the correct preposition, but mainly to know how to use all the resources they have in their repertoire to make it possible for a new way of living for themselves and for the others. How do we transform what we are, who we are, everything we have learned, our biography, into something that can help us create a society which is more, I don't know, that provides freedom for all of us to be who we want to be, respecting who the others are, and live in total connection with nature. How do we think about teaching languages as creating a repertoire with the students, which is so, I don't know, enlarged by different possibilities of being, by understanding that maybe you were brought up within this family with these views, with these possibilities, but perhaps you can open yourself to other ways of being in the world. If you don't choose those ways of being, at least you can respect them if they are something to be respected. And then we get what Ofelia Garcia, who is a dear friend of mine, normally says: how can we use translanguaging? In other words, all the resources we have to create possibilities for a flow in discourse, in living, in giving voices to all different possible realities. How do we create possibilities of language for all people to expand who they are, to resist all kinds of oppression? Well, and how do we transform these into ways of teaching? That's what we call in our group engaged multiliteracies. We depart from what the New London group have worked with. We depart from what Paulo Freire has explained. We depart from what Vygotsky has discussed about teaching and learning and development. And we depart from ideas of indigenous educators, and we create a view of literacy, of language development, which is engaged with reality, engaged with transforming unfair conditions of living. Because we believe in what we see as the good living, the sumak kwasai, this is seen as this framework of living, which is connected to ethical ideas of creating a society with reciprocity, which is poverty-free, which is in connection with nature, in which joy and happiness is part of living, really. And good living is not something you buy on the shelves of a supermarket, but it's something that you produce with the others. You create with the others in the collaborative, welcoming way, which creates new lives, new forms of living, new possibilities of being. But for us to do this, first of all, we need to think about education and educating people from this oppressive forms of living they are in, because our society is oppressive. And so how do we teach people to open up and create new possibilities? We talk about in our group about curriculum de encapsulation. That means that we would think about what we teach in our everyday classes as something that overcomes the limitations of simple present, present perfect, verbs, articles, whatever, about deviates from simply thinking about functions, about genres, about this and that, about history, science, math, in these encapsulated ways. and open up so that people think about ways of living in which language, grammar, history, math, and all these subjects will contribute as tools for us to act, with more resources to discuss, to be, I don't know, empowered in order to create with diversity of knowledge, but not only the knowledge that is considered appropriate by education or by the academy, but all kinds of knowledge, knowledge of everyday life, knowledge of different sources and of different, I don't know, of different people, of different, I don't know, ways of acting, because they can be seen as knowledge if they are part of these things that we are not just take for granted as what it is, but it's something that we are going to try to understand, to critically deal with. And that's where what Paulo Freire used to call critical rigor is going to come. And we are going to talk a little bit about this in a minute. So by doing this, education would become a way to develop agency, not what in Brazil they call protagonism, because protagonism is one more thing that was created by a capitalistic view or an individualistic view of this subject who is the best, who can do things, who has all the power, and forgets in many cases that we are nothing without the others. So when we talk about agency, we connect with what Van Owers says about participation and responsibility, not only for myself, but also for the whole community and with the others. My responsibility and my participation is connected with the responsibility and participation of the others. We are not merely in the world, as Ernest Stetsenko points out. We are implicated in this world. We are co-creators of this world. So how do take this stance, what she calls activist stance, a stance of someone who is responsible and who engages with life and with society. So we go back to Freire and bell hooks, and we say that we are talking about engaged pedagogy, a pedagogy that starts from reality, brings to teach dialogue with different people and different resources. We use analysis, but we construct ways to overcome problems of reality. We think about students participating in this process with full participation, creating relationships with other students, with the teachers, growing in different perspectives and in different directions, believing in themselves as people who can transform realities because they learn how to do it. So I talked a lot now, and this engaged multiliteracies that we talk about seems a very abstract thing. So I brought some examples from different practices that I have created with my colleagues in my research group, LASI. The process I'm going to show you is how we work from immersion in reality. We dive into our reality, trying to understand the issues that are part of our everyday life. Then we use the knowledge of life, of school, and of the curriculum to construct generalizations. That means that we are going to analyze and try to understand the meanings of what we are going through, of the problems we see and analyze. And then we engage with the production of social change. So I'll start with something that happened in Brazil last year. Many of you may know. There is a short video, very short, just for you to know. The man is crying out, asking for people to give him a piece of bread, some food, some milk, or something. And this is the news in Brazil about this issue that was on the media, in the media, and people were sharing this because people were completely shocked by the fact that a father who has nothing to give to his kids goes to the streets to ask for money, for food, because he's hungry. So look at this.
O vídeo tem apenas 18 segundos, o suficiente para o recado ser passado. O flagrante feito numa superquadra de Brasília viralizou na internet e já teve milhares de visualizações. O homem que faz um apelo por comida foi identificado apenas por Marcos. O vídeo é forte, chama a atenção, comove.
So this man is crying, I am hungry. It's hunger. Can you give me something to eat? And in our country, the government says, so what? And this situation created for us the possibility to create aspects to teach. In our case, you may know that in Brazil, we have this very important party that happens in June, Festa Junina, that is the party or when we celebrate that we have food, we have different types of dances, and we have a lot of different possibilities to play, and we use this which is a project in most schools in Brazil, to work with a campaign against hunger. And we started by working with the idea that we could create something, we could use a poem. And so we did different versions of a Brazilian poem. This one is in Portuguese. I'm not going to play it through. I'm going just to show you how we started a project with working with this idea of hunger, and we got to understanding life and how we can intervene in life using language, using math, using other areas in order to do something against the unfair conditions of living of people in Brazil. So this is a poem created by students and teachers to...
Gente com fome, tem gente com fome, tem gente com fome. E não é fome.
So what they're doing is they're saying there are hungry people, and it's not any kind of hunger. So they are working on a very, very famous poem and creating from it in order to invite people to participate and try to create something else. In this campaign, they start with an immersion in reality, because we use the sustainable development objectives, the one that is about hunger, and we connect this to different areas, and we connect this to our Junin party, our Festa Junina, and we try to involve people and capture them and involve them and immerse with them in experiences of our day life. We build opportunity to create an engagement with reality, with concrete situations. So we show different events in which people are hungry and are suffering. And then we try to integrate this to the themes that have to be taught at school. And we do this by playing in a Festa Junina. So we create something like this, Tombalata, which you have a ball and you throw the ball. This was all online. So people work with throwing the ball and trying to guess the number and see what they got as a prize. But the prizes were all connected to analytical ways of understanding the reasons for hunger. And they had to study a lot of different texts on geography, on history, to understand why Brazil suffers with hunger. Also, they had this other game, which we call in Brazil, roleta. I don't know the name of this in English, but anyway, they do this, and they had to work with argumentation to say why we have hunger in Brazil. So depending on what they got, they had to give a reason for hunger, but they had to do it in an argumentative way. And we were working with the language of argumentation. So we created a critical construction of generalizations, because we use different forms and ways of understanding the situation of hunger in Brazil in order to develop ways to historically intervene in this problem. Finally, in the production of social change, they created, just like in the other one, this typical poem and type of poetry in Brazil, cordel, using different aspects. And in this case, we put together people from different countries and Brazilians to create this poem and to ask for money, to ask for food. And we did a campaign with this and with the kids, and we raised a lot of money and food and other items to give to people in favelas areas where we worked. This is an example of how we work with engaged multiliteracies. So we depart from a problem in reality. We understand it. We use language. We use knowledge, school knowledge. We try to understand all the aspects, and we build resources, instruments to intervene. We create a campaign. We create poems. We create connections. We create a website, and students have to go through this process, creating possibilities for the production of social change. So now let's see some examples of how we do this, how we build these cracks that Catherine Walsh talks about. How do we create insurgent practices, practices that within a situation that is horrible, people find small cracks in the wall, which will be a fissure that we are going to try to move and make it bigger, so that we can create new possibilities. So in this project when we had meetings that at PUC São Paulo in person, we worked with DigitMed, which was a digital media education group working with to develop projects for school encapsulation. We had there schools for the blind, schools for migrant people in Bolivia, Haiti, and we had bilingual schools for very wealthy groups. We have very poor groups from public schools in São Paulo. And one of the projects we did was on express yourself through art. And we use all kinds of different ways to discuss dealing with inequalities. And we use, you can't believe the different ways of dealing with inequality we did. Going to the movies, going to the theater, going to a musical, everything you can imagine. And I brought to you Living a Slam Battle. In this case, it's very essential. I'm not presenting now something that had to do with English language teaching. I'm presenting a generic project which we worked with here. Actually, we were working with sign language. And in this example, you see this woman is a deaf slammer. And she's presenting a slam poem to the group and teaching them how to interact in a slam battle with both speaking and deaf people. So I'm going to play just a bit so you can see. Students who are very used to learning about poetry and about poems and studying these at school saw a different kind of poetry, a poetry of resistance, a way of dealing and using poems to confront reality, to express themselves. They learned that this is a collective movement. Look. They learned how to participate in an event, and by immersing in this reality, they learned about this way of writing, this way, what this kind of poems were, how this kind of poetry was created, why, what are the different ways of doing this in the States, how it came to Brazil, what they could write, and they wrote their own slams. PUC has a very special place. I don't know if you know, but this place you see in this picture here is called Prainha. I miss this so much. This is the place for many revolutions in PUC and in São Paulo to start. And then these kids were in PUC with us, and they presented their slams, the slams they created, their battles in English, in Portuguese, in sign language, and they all participated in this movement within the academic world, creating a poetry that is a revolutionary poetry. And they learned how to do this in the school context. In this case, I will just play a little bit because I love and I like the energy. So I want you to feel the energy with me. This is what they did. This is a slammer. He was there to teach the kids. He's not a PhD, but he was at the university teaching students and teachers about slams. And this is the encapsulation. Who do we learn from? Do we only learn from scholars? Do we learn from whom? This is the idea of the different resources.
Sangue!
they learned the energy of creating Islam and participated in one. And it was so strong that these schools created in their own places, their own Islam battles. They, instead of creating soirees, they created Islam battles and Islam movements in their own schools. This is a project. Another one we worked with was dealing with garbage. What do we do with trash, with garbage in Brazil? What do we do with this? So here's an example. The students worked with creating a reality in which we perform. We do a lot of theater and performance, and we took all the trash cans from the class, and we created this, I don't know, we had a snack and we threw the garbage on the floor, and then we played around this idea. What does it mean? We played a video in which people threw the garbage on the floor, and then suddenly they realized that that was something that was not to be done because someone threw the garbage in the basket, and there was a dance and so on in a video from, I think it's from, I don't know, from Canada, I'm not sure, I don't remember anymore, but it was the introduction, the immersion in reality. And students who thought it was very fine to just throw the garbage on the floor started reflecting on this and discussing this. Then we read different texts on garbage and garbage and different ways of dealing with collecting aluminum and what it meant with different perspectives, different ideas. Students discussed garbage collecting in different perspectives, and then they had to reflect and think about themselves as if they were the mayors of a city and had to deal with garbage, what they would do, how they would work, what they could do. And in the end, they wrote to the principal, and in this picture you can see some students from the Northeast who went to the Congress and talked to this assembly about what their problems with garbage were. Many projects are conducted like this. This one was with very young children about going to bed, and you can read about it in Samantha Malta Pereira da Silva's dissertation about how to teach young kids and how to create a perspective of going to bed that improves what we believe about the world and different ways of living and what can be done and how kids can learn ways of participating while they are learning English. And this other one, a student of mine, Milena, during the times of quarantine, they discussed about how do we travel and go sightseeing and how do we contribute to society by doing this. And they did it, and they reflected about parks, about what people do to parks and how they could participate in this. So I will conclude my presentation talking about the process of being, knowing, and doing, and how language, translanguaging, using and teaching language in a transgressive, in a decolonized way, can create new ways of being, new ways of knowing who you are, what you know and what you do, how you participate, and what repertoires you can construct. Last year we participated in this event in Nigeria. Of course, it was an online event, and some of the students who participate in our project, Brincadas, they joined it and they created this video to participate in this movement. Listen to them.
I tried to write about the side of it, try to say that I love being unique, but if I'm being honest, there's some things I like to say about the human part that I just try to hide away, you know? All this pressure I'm constantly in, all the stress I have to deal, the pain I always feel. I look back to the things I've been through and question myself, what the last years almost feel like hell. Day by day, you listen to the news, anxiety and depression, they're taking the best of us. The kids are struggling with mental health issues, while society ignores that we have a situation. I'm tired of the standard impossible beauty. Why my body needs to be thin to be viewed as pretty. Why my skin has to be a certain tone. I'm tired of having to do all of you guys wrong. O mundo tá em caos e eu também estou. E se eu já em qual caminho, não sei pra onde eu vou. Me sustento no que acredito, de dentro veio o grito, minhas raízes e quem eu sou. O mundo tá em caos e eu também estou. Não sei pra onde vou. call me bright, you don't have to be the smartest, the prettiest, the nicest, perfect daughter. I have to be the most pure and the kind one, knowing everything around me is just alright. You need to go to college, you need to get a job, you need to get a scholarship, you need to be proud. The perfect example to show the system more, even in the way you lose a little of your soul. The government will have you almost messing up the stuff. Change after change, and we can't stand up. The landscape of future through education, and I wonder if I ever get to my graduation. Mesmo tempo não que acredito, de dentro vem o grito, minhas raízes e quem eu sou. Não tá em causa, eu também estou, não sei pra onde vou.
Queríamos um pouco mais de atenção, mas sempre que tentamos dizem que nossa idade é pouca. Às vezes acham que estou ficando louca. Como pode a experiência ser uma pedra no caminho para os jovens ser ouvidos, entendidos, compreendidos, as ideias e a vontade de mudar a realidade precária e nas ruas protestar? Mas é importante que nos ouçam sem interromper para dizer: você é muito nova para saber.
O mundo tá em caos, eu também estou. Visto se jovem para o caminho, não sei pra onde eu vou. Me sustento no que acredito, de dentro tenho preto minhas raízes e quem eu sou. O mundo tá em caos, eu também estou. Não sei pra onde vou. Quando chegar o momento, esse meu sofrimento, vou pagar com juros. Todo esse amor reprimido, esse grito contido, esse amor escuro.
So kids presented this, they joined, they use their knowledge, they use their imagination, they create the lyrics, they create the song, they created everything using their resources and had mobility to participate in this event in Nigeria. That's to denounce what they feel, how they feel, and to create this life which is not useful, but which is fully lived, fully created, not only for survival, but for living in plenitude. I hope I could contribute today, and I thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think everybody should use the emoji or the reaction icons to show Fernanda all the love she deserves for this. I will do so right now myself. There we go. We'll have another 2 sessions starting at the hour. So it is possible for the next couple of minutes, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Fernanda specifically, feel free to unmute yourself and do so, or you can put them in the chat box. There weren't any specific questions, but there was lots of chat during the chat.
Yeah, I'm trying to save it so I can connect to people later, but I can't, I don't know if I can. So if you want to ask questions or say something, I would be willing to answer. Okay, Cecilia.
I do have a question. I put it in the chat. Hi, Fernanda. Thank you so much, first of all, for sharing these very inspiring, as everyone has said, incredibly inspiring projects. And I think I know the answer, but I'd like to ask you if you could notice more engagement from students with these, in engaging with language learning and producing because of the projects in comparison with more traditional approaches to language teaching.
Oh, certainly. It's so funny. We work, first of all, we don't work specifically only with language. We always put together the different areas. They have to learn about math, social science, everything in order to participate in the projects. But of course, language mediates all this. And well, they are doing something. They are responsible. Look at these girls. They're crying out loud what they feel and how they feel and what it means to live life these times that we are living. So they they feel that there is something that they connect to and that they can do. And I have a lot of films about these kids saying how they changed because of the projects they went through. It's not a question of learning a language only. It's a question of learning how to be in the world and using language as a resource for them to be in the world. So, well, I have a lot of texts in which I write about this, but there is a special one which is about the encapsulated something. I don't even remember the title of the text, but that's one that I like very much. And if you want, I'll put my email and you can write to me and I can send it to you. If you go to ResearchGate, you can find many of my texts, but not this one because this is from a book and they don't allow us to put books. Of course, they want to sell the books. So. But I think, yes, it gives them a lot of energy to live. It's not only a question of education, it's a question of learning how to live. And
great, awesome, thank you so much. In the interest of time, I'm going to stop us right now.